Alrighty, hello everybody. Welcome to the AI Leap from hype to operational excellence. My name is Jonathan Gandalf. I'm founder and CEO of The Juice, and we are extremely excited sponsoring this session. So thank you for coming out. Really excited about this session. Here at The Juice, what we do is we aggregate B2B content, and then an individual professional like yourself can sign up and read or listen or watch that content. When generative AI first jumped on the scenes, we were expecting to see nothing but AI content resonating on our platform. That actually didn't happen right away. What happened instead was that it took about 4 or 5 months. Everybody was talking about generative AI content, how it's going to change the future. Nobody was reading it. In 4 months, people started writing about how to use generative AI, how to use AI in their day-to-day role, how to use it for operational efficiencies, and that's when that content became extremely popular on our platform. I'm even more excited to be introducing Jake Miller of Engineered Innovation Group and Brett Flincham of Stellar.ai. We've actually worked with both of these teams, and we're big fans of theirs. I hope we get to work with both of them in the future as well. You're going to learn a lot today, so without further ado, I'm going to let them introduce themselves and invite them up here on stage. Thank you.
All right, can y'all hear me? How is everyone doing? Need more coffee? I need more coffee. Actually, I don't need more coffee. Well, thanks all for joining this session. Brett and I are both really excited about this. You'll see we're going to do kind of 2 different parts. And I'm going to get you hyped up about all the hype of AI. How does that sound? So my name's Jake Miller. I'm CEO and founder of the Engineered Innovation Group. I've been a software engineer myself for 22 plus years. I've worked in marketing and automation for Salesforce, Exact Target Story for those that are based in Indiana. And EIG is an innovation agency where we take emerging technologies and bring them to life. So let's get into some of this content. What would you think if I told you by 2035, the world population would be 35 billion people? You would probably think, how are we going to feed all of these people? Where did all of they come from? Oh my gosh, that's a lot of babies. But there is a twist to that, and if I get my button clicker here, right? They will not be human. They will be digital people. Now, there was a study done where participants were asked, how likely would you be to date a digital human? And a whopping 20% said, yes, I would. Hype? I don't know. Answer for yourself, right? So, okay. We know, based on products that we've built, customers we're working with, trends in the industry, that digital human technology, and actually I'm going to go back here, digital human technology, while it is a novelty right now, is on the way. But it is a novelty today, and folks are having a hard time implementing it. It's expensive, but can you imagine the day where you are on a Zoom call with multiple digital colleagues, and those colleagues are taking your notes, they're doing your follow-ups, you have someone that's an expert in your finances, someone that's an expert in a specific customer account. Those types of use cases, albeit a little far away. So what we're finding is, and this was a study actually produced by Salesforce, answers to what are people actually trying to do today. 47% are wanting to increase productivity, 25% improving their product offering. This has actually changed slightly since May of this year. Decision making is growing. And a separate study showed 91% of organizations have increased demand for process automation. Generative AI is a fantastic use case for that, or tool for that. And what we're learning is there are 2 broad buckets that you can put use cases into. And it took us a while to figure this out. It may seem obvious in hindsight, but it's building features using generative AI into your products, or using generative AI for internal process automation, productivity gains. So who in here has not used some form of generative AI, let's say ChatGPT or the likes, at least once a day to do something, perform a task. I probably should say who, because then everyone's hand is going to go up, right? That's just the tip of the iceberg. And you can imagine the world, I like to use this analogy. Think about the world in the late 90s with e-commerce. And no one really knew what to do with it. And you had Sears and JCPenney and these big behemoth companies say, well, we need to do something about this online purchasing stuff. Let's get Ken with a red stapler in the basement to figure out what we're going to do with it. And then along comes Amazon. There weren't a lot of tools, platforms, and products to build on top of yet, and that's where we are today. So I was asked to share a real use case, and this one is definitely cutting edge. This is a platform that we have built, and it is called Luster, and it is a sales simulation tool. And the heart of this was actually a byproduct. So the dialogue discourse engine was a byproduct of our own technology to build digital people, which is very much in its infancy. And so that innovation is coming to life through this really awesome tool where you can scale sales leaders training using actual phone calls, actual transcripts, actual sales collateral to get SDRs and BDRs trained up at scale in an organization. So this is real live use case today. It's just like you're on right now a voice call with a client, and you're trying to convince them to purchase your product or schedule a demo or a call with the revenue leader or the buyer. And so last comment here, let me hand it over, is think about AI as a layer on the tech stack. And what I mean by that is, I do not believe this to be hype. I do believe in a year to two, the types of products we are using will have fewer buttons and fewer labels and be much more chat interfaces, much more human-like. And so it begs the question, what happens to all the data and systems we have? How do I interact with that? How do I pull data from the N number of systems I have in my organization? And those are solvable with Gen AI, and actually much more accessible because the nature of Gen AI allowing us to manage unstructured data in a much more effective way versus the discrete mapping of today. So we like to think about generative AI really as permeating, that it's a layer on top of the tech stack. And with that said, we have some more information on operational excellence.
Thank you. Testing, that working? Thank you guys. I'm Brett Flincham. I'm the CEO of Stellar. We are based here in Indianapolis. I actually live in Mountain View, California, so we kind of bridge Silicon Valley and Indianapolis. And as Jake said, we're really focused on building real and tangible stuff. So I'm going to show you some kind of blood and guts applications and things that we're building similar to what Jake just described. I'll add to his comment, though, about hype. I like to think about, everybody's probably familiar with the Gartner hype cycle, right? You go through from a new innovation, you go through this enormous hype, and then you sort of fall into this, they call it the trough of disillusionment, right? And one of the things for me that kind of triggered that is, I don't know if you saw the commercial during the Olympics where a dad is helping his daughter write a fan letter. It's a Google Gemini commercial, and they had to pull it. They got so much noise from that, and I agree with them. I mean, you take this most human experience of your kid writing a fan letter to someone, and you want to outsource that to AI. So I think things like that sort of lead you into disillusionment, but what Jake and I both are focused on is building real, tangible, meaningful solutions. The other thing I just want to say about what's possible with the technology today, And I'm stealing this from one of my employees who we were with a customer yesterday, was telling them this. The new technology, what we're really focused on is not making 10% improvement or 20% or 30% improvement, but really doing 2x or 3x or 5x or 10x, right? It's very, very transformative and meaningful for businesses. And by the way, the typical hype cycle, you go through this trough of disillusionment, you sort of emerge into productive applications over time. And so, we feel like, and Jake and I both do, we're all actually building productive solutions. There's a lot of stuff on this slide, but let me tell you about this. This is an amazing use case. And I'm going to give you 2 use cases, same company, different applications within the company, but to give you a flavor of what's possible. So this company is in 160 different countries around the globe. It's a medical device company. So they're selling a very complex technology. The complexity to it's amazing. By the way, a salesperson, I'm using the example of Monique, who's a territory manager in Senegal, French-speaking country, okay? French-speaking country. Global competitors, CSL, Behring, Boston Scientific, Abbott. She's in hand-to-hand combat out there selling. The selling process, she's working with blood centers, hospitals, clinics, R&D institutions, academic institutions. It's really sophisticated technology. By the way, they have, I'm going to say hundreds of thousands, it may even be millions of these devices, right, all over the globe, right? And she's in hand-to-hand combat out there selling, and she's in a competitive situation, and she needs more information. And the current process is she sends an email to a field marketing support team, and 9 days later, she gets a response. And by the way, that response is a bunch of files and documents, right, that she's got to sort through. It's competitive intelligence, it's product specs on their product internally. It's contraindications on medications that she had to learn about, that the doctor or the institution was asking her about. A lot of complexity she doesn't have the answer for. 9-day response from marketing to get that answer. And by the way, all the product documentation's in English, right? So she's got to go through that, make determinations about it, and then talk to her customer about it a couple of weeks later, right? What you can do with AI, and what we did, is we ingested all this information. So we ingest all their product documentation, we ingest all their internal battle cards and competitive information. We go out and scroll the web and other sources for all publicly available information on their competitors and their competing products. We ingest all the information on contraindications of medication, other things, put it all in a repository, and now she can query that, right? And the way that I like to say this is, ask a very specific question and get a very specific answer. And the thing that I like to emphasize, and this is the work that we both do up here, right now, you guys, everybody in the audience could ask ChatGPT the same question, and you'd get a load of different answers, right? What we do is, this isn't intended to be a sales pitch, but I want you to get across what's possible, right? What we do is build models around the large language model that ensure you get the same answer every time that's the right answer that's correct, right? So, if you think about what her process was, which is waiting a couple weeks, getting a bunch of complex documentation, having to go through that herself, having to try to find the answers to the questions for the doctor, having some element of insecurity with the answer, not knowing that it's right. Now she can ask a very specific question, get a very specific answer. And by the way, over time, we also have an intelligence mechanism that's learning, right, getting smarter. I wish I could share with you results of what this transforms for them, but we're early in the deployment. The feedback is fabulous, but I don't have metrics to share. But what I would expect to see is dramatically reduced cycle time, right, on the selling process. much higher close rate when you can be responsive real time, right? Quality of the answers that she's able to give. And just think about this, these guys are in 160 different countries, multi-language, right? We're able to communicate with them in their language of choice, right? And provide accurate information and answers. So, you know, back to it's not 1x or 2x improvement. I mean, I really think you're talking about 5 and 10 and enormous measures of improvement. Same company, another use case, a little different use case. So these devices are all over the world. They have errors, things go wrong, right? They get a call into customer support to fix it. There's a lot in that current process. By the way, if we diagram the current process, it'd blow your mind. I mean, there's a million, you know, trees in the decision tree. There's enormous complexity of, you know, is it a user problem at the site? Is it a product problem? Does it map to a component or part problem? You just go down this list of possibilities. By the way, you get into the multi-language problem, right? So being able to manage that call across geographies and across languages and able to discern. And by the way, one person will use certain language describing a problem. Someone else will use, let's say they use the same language, but the actual, you know, in further analysis, the root cause is completely different, right? So there's a lot of confusion about all of that. The other critical element, I'm checking the time here so I don't go too long, but the other critical element is there's reporting. So this IMDRF is the medical device reporting. So there's requirements of reporting that are, you know, they're institutionalized and they're very, very important. By the way, this company was backlogged 100,000 customer issues to get actually properly reported. And I'll also add in their process, they have a quality team. So all of these calls get logged, you know, problems get addressed, and the calls are sort of classified in the person taking the call classifies the problem with some coding, some particular coding that the government requires. They actually have to have a quality team review all of that and either recode or adjust the code. They're very rarely coded properly, right? Because there's just a lot of complexity and all to coding it and actually diagnosing the problem. So again, I'm painting the picture of how complicated this process is. Back to what's so transformative today with the new technology, and this is just back to you can get 100x and really large improvements. You know, historically, there's a lot of that you can problem solve with machine learning and AI, but now there's an integration of Gen AI, machine learning that kind of unlocks a whole new power, right? And a whole new power of automation, particularly on the Gen AI side, because now you can actually capture text and absorb text and you can learn from the text. So historically, where, you know, you've got a customer with a problem, you've coded it a certain way, so you've got structured data. But then you typically have a text field with a lot of color on that data. And that text field is usually not very useful. It's not absorbed, it's not acted on. Now, what you're able to do is kind of combine this notion of structured and unstructured data, text, video, voice, right, with tabular data, structured data, and create a whole new outcome. So basically, we can process that information. We can actually learn. There's intelligence on that information. At our initial deployment of this, the human, after quality review and coding, the human accuracy rate was 72%. So most of their submissions, even when they're submitting the government final completed analysis, what they're submitting, 72% accuracy. On our first pass, we had 80% accuracy on the first pass out of the gate. And our system's going to continue to learn, and I would expect we'll get in the 90s and that's what we're targeting to get to in terms of accuracy of coding. And by the way, we're doing it like this. As our customer described, this was what was expected to be a 3 or 4 month problem to clean up this 100,000 backlog. And it was, this is crazy, but it was actually categorized, data was categorized in days. So in days, it was categorized and more accurate, than people doing it. Now, we all, and I know, Jake, you feel this way too, we really believe that, I think it's a little scary to people. Are we displacing jobs, and are we doing, what's the human impact of all of this? Every single case that we're doing, I keep finding that we're empowering employees and people to work on much more interesting work and much more powerful work and much more meaningful work for the company. So, I think we're able to just continue to expand this rote work that we sort of take out of the system and empower employees to really work on real problems. Trying to think if I think the other important thing with this application is, then you get to, okay, we've coded things properly, we know what the problem is, but you can actually generate output, generative AI, generate output to product management of summarize the product defects and what's going on. What manufacturing plant are they associated with? These devices are built all over the world in different plants. What components or parts are failing, right? So that we can submit that to our suppliers. If it's a training issue for users, which there's a lot of this, right? What are the training enhancements that need to be built and deployed in messaging? So that generating, powerful output to empower the organization. So I just think it's the magnitude of just transformation, both the first use case of empowering selling, the second use case of, reducing administrative time, empowering product management to make the right decisions, uncovering supplier problems, training and use cases for users. I mean, it's really transformative. So, the purpose of our talk to say that it's not all hype. There's a lot of hype out there, but there's some pretty meaningful work going on, and we encourage people, I use the term participate, right? Because I think if you sit on the sidelines and you wait 4 or 5 years for all the technology to unfold, it's going to be hard to sort of catch up and integrate. But I think if you participate now, take advantage of these things, you get immediate lift in the business, and you're learning and growing and working towards a future. So thank you, and we're happy to answer some questions. So.
We've got Jonathan here with a mic, if anyone would like to ask questions. One over here. Oh, we got one over there. I think he's got you now. All right, I can repeat. We can repeat it for you. Yeah.
You want to take it?
You can take that.
All right. By the way, wonderful question. It's funny, we think about this all the time, every day, and are working on this. And my quick comment is, and this is, again, this gets a little academic when I say this, but have you guys read Jeffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm from way back, right? It's an early 90s book, but it keeps getting updated. It's widely read. But there's this notion when there's a technology change, right, of early on you're selling to innovators and early adopters, and then there's this chasm, right, to get to, I forget the term, but it's kind of the majority, right, to the majority. And then you have laggards on the far end, right, of this thing. But there's this huge chasm. So I think right now, by the way, it's 100% innovators and early adopters that are championing, right? So like for us, number one, we have to find those people. Sounds like you're one of them, right? To find those innovators and champions. But what we try to do is give a small bite, right? Take a small bite. You don't have to go, do a small thing, right? Some of these things where we ingest manuals and make them easy to interpret. With education, we're doing some interesting stuff where we're ingesting applicant information and then summarizing, putting it together. I just think if you can get people motivated to take a small bite, but it's a hard problem, by the way. It's a very hard problem. And there's, and the hype cycle hurts it, right? Because there's just so much noise about unproductive things, right? So, great question.
We got Roger here. I know everyone's name.
Working? Hello?
Yeah.
It's pretty easy to build a interface around many of the open source or publicly available models now. How do you think about it if companies are bringing AI products to market? How do you think about where the differentiators will be in terms of, if anybody can build on OpenAI and et cetera, how should companies think about building a moat?
Yeah, the moat is a very big, important question. And actually, Brett was talking about it a little bit earlier. It's the data that the organization has is their gold mine. And the opportunity is for organizations to figure out how do I take the disparate data, all of my different sources, and bring it together in such a way that I can answer questions that weren't possibly answerable before. And so right now, that is a RAG model, typically, using vector databases. But that's where that's the first place, actually, we're having people focus building the moat is what's special about the data that you have. The second is ask the question, now how do I plug into an ecosystem, right? So that AI layer I was alluding to later, the boundaries between SaaS products and companies and each organization are going to become less strong. And in fact, it's better for folks if we have a much stronger integration layer for your customers. So thinking about how you fit into the broader ecosystem is just as important as the data.
The couple of things I'll add, that I think that's exactly right. When I think about what's our opportunity, all of us, what's our opportunity to participate? And I kind of think of these three buckets. So on one side, you've got kind of direct access to ChatGPT or big foundational models, right? Then I think there's this middle bucket where you've got a Salesforce or ServiceNow or Zoom or Gong that are incorporating AI technology into their products, right? Mm-hmm. And then you've got Jake and I on this other end, which is we're integrating all of those things and kind of taking advantage of those. And I'll speak for me, I think this is true for Jake. I mean, we're not building foundational models, right? I'm leveraging the $40 billion that Google's spending on developing that technology, or Microsoft or whoever, which is wonderful, right? So they've got all of that power. You've got Salesforce and ServiceNow and those companies incorporating a lot of power into their applications. But there's a really important need, right, of integrating those pieces, keeping safety and security top of mind, and as Jake was alluding to, is protecting proprietary data carefully. Now, you're right, you can do a lot of that internally, but I really feel like the technology is changing so fast and there's so much happening that there's a lot of advantage. Again, I'm selling, I'm not supposed to sell, but to having people that are kind of living it every day and building a lot of different stuff, because it's changing. You wake up tomorrow and there's a new model with new capabilities. It's amazing. We demoed some stuff yesterday. We showed the customer. It was integrating some vision technology, and we told them we couldn't demo this 3 months ago. The technology actually didn't exist to do this. So but it's a great question, right? And by the way, organizations are building a lot of competency in the area, right? So.
And I'm going to add to that, because I think you mentioned foundational models, and these companies are spending millions of dollars to train those. Charlene Tay, our senior director of AI, keeps telling our customers, stop thinking about building a foundational model. it's too expensive, and frankly, it's not going to be useful for you. What's useful for you is to figure out what are the requirements for the use case you're solving. Is it okay to use a model that's publicly hosted? Is it better to use a model that you are deploying in your customer's data center, your own infrastructure? Those are sorts of questions to ask. I had one more thought, but I'll leave it at that. Actually, I'll add it. I think of foundational models as a SQL database, right? Like, you're not going to go write SQL, at least unless you do it for fun. And I know someone that wrote their own query language for fun. Just throw it. Lob it in there.
Currently, in what you guys are seeing, how much are you seeing chains of related or unrelated models kind of being used together in the same application? Like, how much of this boils down to we have a classification problem versus you're really combining, speech to text to some classification generation, whatever?
I'll say from our experience, I think by the way, it's a thoughtful question, and I do think it's going to evolve that way more. For this customer that I showed up here, we actually ran their solutions through multiple models, and then we gave them kind of accuracy on outputs and other information, and then we did settle on one model, right? So far, that's been kind of what's been unfolding for us. But I think the case may come, right, where you've got a voice integration thing that you want to leverage a certain model for and another. It's a great thought. I haven't built anything like that yet, but I definitely foresee that happening. But we do run solutions through models and then make a choice of what's optimal for the customer. And also it's relevant of, like, if the customer's an Azure shop, right, then there's a bias to try to make, an OpenAI or a Microsoft infrastructure solution available. However, people, we have gone outside. In one particular customer, we went outside the Google environment, the Microsoft environment, to a Gemini model, because the Gemini model, it was specifically worked for their use case. So.
Yeah. Try your code in ChatGPT, and if the Python doesn't work, go to Gemini. Yeah. I've never done that. Can I add on to that? Slightly different perspective, because a lot of the companies we work with are very much focused on either they have a brand new product they're taking to market, or they have a SaaS product and they're asking the question, how do I not get snuffed out by the new competitors that can build super fast, right? And what's been really interesting is that Luster example I gave you. We did the same thing where it's like you figure out which foundational model you want to use, yada, yada, yada. But what is really interesting is starting to chain the technologies. Like, when I'm speaking, you have to be able to know when am I speaking and when am I not, right? You have to, if you have multiple people speaking, do what's called diarization, which is a terrible name, to figure out who are the different speakers that are talking. You have to stream that off, and there are different ways to do it, but you stream that off to a text-to-speech model. The text-to-speech, speech-to-text rather, takes what you're saying, puts it into words, and then that has to send it off to a different system that's either doing some categorization, or in their case, it's just Q&A against a model. And then you have to go all the way back, right? And so, and then there are all sorts of other complications in between. But you can now then imagine, now what I want to do is, as part of this conversation, plug in spreadsheets. And I want data to start presenting itself as I'm talking, as we're having this conversation. I want the information to change. Just like Brett was saying, that is the evolution. Like, that's not happening yet, but that is where we are going. I think people are just now figuring out how to use Q&A. The enterprises have figured out, okay, what do I do about security, so I can host my own foundational model, or what are just general useful use cases? And Brett, you could tell me, you hit on such an important piece here, which is, we talked about before we got on stage, the KPI you're trying to track. Like, what are you actually trying to measure to solve? Start there, and that's where people are just trying to just now figuring out what to do. That was long-winded, but.
Thank you all for talking about this, by the way. That's pretty awesome. So 76% of 76% of employees are using generative AI at work, but only 46% of businesses are, which means there's an incredible amount of shadow IT across not just one model, something like 100 models. So how is a CIO supposed to sleep at night?
Yeah, that can I?
You go ahead, yeah.
I'm sure we both can comment on that. That's our life, by the way. It's a really important thing. You know, you mentioned the shadow IT, shadow AI is become this huge term now, right? That is exactly what you're describing. Let me tell you this story related to this. We had this customer. We built a particular solution for a department and it's a big company, big enterprise, and we built a solution for them. And the initial solution we kind of built in our environment for them to POC and test. And anyway, all of that we had enthusiastic, ready to deploy in fans. Then we go meet with IT because we got to integrate into the IT environment. And the IT guy said to me, he said, look, I think that's great. Those guys love you. Guess what? I hate you. I hate you because, they have proprietary HIPAA compliant data that is getting shipped. He said, my stuff's going all around. You're working with this department. I got another person working with this department, another person never mind the shadow AI part, right? Like all this is going on, and I don't know where our data is. And our response to them was, we can help you with that. And what we did, and you're right in that gap between, sort of corporate utilization and then personal utilization, but if you can make the tools available in a safe environment, which is what we've done, and I use the notion of an orchestration platform for IT, so that now everything is going, now he gets user and usage management, he gets to see where the data is and where the data is going, he gets to keep it in the confines of their environment. So it's an emerging problem, and there's not a clean solution, but I think ultimately it's going to be bringing in a solution that's provided for your enterprise, right, to let people use that, and then you don't have to hotwire it, right, around the corporate infrastructure. But
I totally agree. We worked on and built an engine for a company that was a data loss prevention platform, and this was really early on. And the idea was, if you can have an interface, and by the way, my opinion, if I were to do this again, has changed, but at the time it was, if you can have an interface that allows folks to interact with various models, but you are running it through an engine that can redact, dehydrate, rehydrate that information, you're getting a massive benefit of knowing exactly what people are sending, right? So starting off with like PII, PHI, and actually we wrote an algorithm that was proven to be 90% accurate, which most DLP solutions are more like 60, and it was helpful. But where I'm seeing things go now is, one, I think there's a desperate need in the market for like a true holistic platform, and we'll get there. But it is, can you, as an IT organization, provide the tools, like let's just say access to ChatGPT models, right? Like Azure provides containerized, self-hosted models where you don't have to worry about that data getting leaked. But it's a chicken or the egg, it's arms race, which is always the case.
Last one.
last question, they said. So.
Yeah, I got it.
You talked earlier about having that data as being a moat to some of your solutions. How do you negotiate data level access with your customers? Like, what can you do once you're managing a hosted solution for them? Like, what can you do with that data? What can you not do with that data, especially with customers who have sensitive PII and HIPAA regulations?
Yeah, I have, but I would just say, that there's kind of integrating historical and typical role-based access controls to data. So what we're generally doing is we're deploying the customer's environment. And by the way, we are working on solutions that go across areas of the company. It can be finance, right? It can be HR. It can be, actual operations practitioners in healthcare. Whatever it is, and everybody's kind of got their unique role-based access controls to data that's available to them. And if we can work inside that environment, and you're not taking stuff out of that environment and risking it outside, and that, I think that's becoming the more common framework. So the person in finance that's got access to a lot of sensitive information, they've already got access to that information. We mirror those access controls to the data that they're leveraging and able to access and work with. That's how I think about it. I don't know if that fully.
Like applying the data across, like privacy and ethical use of data is where you're going, you think?
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah. You can comment on that, but I mean, we definitely are walled off, right, from other customers. We manage that. We're typically managing their data in their own environment. We're developing in their environment with them, but there's no sharing or crossing of that data, right? It's definitely protected and proprietary to the customer. And Jake mentioned the notion of dehydrating and rehydrating data, and there's definitely a lot of techniques for that. Most of what we're doing is we're working in the customer's environment. We have kind of, part of our contracting structure is that data is not available to us, right, and for use outside of their use case. But you might have some more color.
Yeah, I will add on to that. So LLMs, ChatGPT, I keep using that as an example, but ChatGPT, if you use ChatGPT through the APIs, memory is disabled by default. And LLM is dumb. You send stuff in, it statistically says what are the next tokens to come out, and it sends it back. So nothing is remembered. It's not retraining the model, right? So if you take that perspective, you don't have a big risk, really any risk, to data from one customer in that model leaking to another. The problem comes in when if you say, oh, now I want to enrich data for a specific customer, well, that's where what I'm calling, well, I didn't make up the word context, but I use it in a slightly different way than a lot of folks, right? Context being, so for example, we have an internal system that we are making into a product and a platform. And what it does, it listens to email, every Slack conversation, every voice transcript, pretty much a HubSpot code, everything in our company is pulled in. How awful would it be if someone could have access to my finance conversation, right? And so the way that you manage that is, yes, we use an LLM, but they're all context. Anything that goes into that particular context, there are access controls around. So I can access that. So then you say, well, what happens if, it's shared information that I want Jake to be able to know, but I also want Susie Q to be able to know? Well, you have multiple contexts, right? And I'm happy to nerd out on all of that later. We're out of time. But yeah, you obviously got me really excited.
Thank you, guys. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone.